Welcome back to Insights. I'm joined by ACC Professor of Political Science, Tim Kuhnlein. And Tim, we were just talking about the executive office mainly, but let's move on to, Congress. The Senate and the House were both won by, or both have Republican majorities after the election. So tell me what that means when you have a political party having the three main branches right now in Washington.
Well, it's not the first time. In fact, if you look back at our most recent presidencies, there's usually a switch, usually midterm, in a president's four-year term. And we're probably going to see something similar to that. It's kind of interesting to go back and look at, okay, who's president, what was the composition of Congress in the first 2 years, then midterm elections, what happened, and what we find is there's a constant flip-flop. And so in terms of the partisan domination in Congress and in both chambers relative to the executive branch. And I suspect we'll see this this trend continue because it's part of that seesaw struggle that we're finding in the partisan divide, the zero-sum game tactics that are really not that dramatic, but we're making them very dramatic. And we're trying to winnow down formulas that work for most Americans, especially as most Americans are feeling like they're being left out of the success equation, the prosperity equation. So, and the Republicans, well, I should say the Trump campaign was very effective at speaking to that population.
And which is very interesting too, because this is a billionaire businessman who is speaking to people who are, lower class and middle class, working class people.
Yeah, but you can understand if you really listen, if you can get past this rhetoric and really look at some of the issues, especially in hindsight now, even though he did a lot of double talk and you really don't know what to think of what he's going to do, he was able to hone in on some strategic issues that I think spoke to that independent voter, the Reagan Democrat, the people who, over a third of our population who are claimed to be independents. Keeping in mind only 4% of our population are actually members of either of the political parties. So we're all independents in that sense. But he was able to pull a strategic percentage of that population in a razor-thin race to win this victory. And it had coattail effects, of course, the farther down the ballot you go.
Definitely, and that we saw those coattail effects here in Michigan as well, with many Republicans winning the state office in Lansing, and also we saw the first congressional district go to a Republican, to Jack Bergman. So, do you think he had a huge effect on Republicans winning most local elections?
Definitely, and it really played out not only in the 2-to-1 margins in places like the first congressional district, but and this is sort of a moderate, almost a Reagan Democrat type environment, really, because when you think about Bart Stupak having served as a moderate Democrat for 18 years, and then we shifted to Republican control of the seat, and now we've got a second phase of that. It's the question of can you reach that center ground, and in this case it was a 2-to-1 margin. But this is coattail effect for sure. It's also when you've got to look at the state, and it was those counties that voted Obama in the last two elections actually flipped to Trump this time. And those are counties where you get this sort of middle class, skilled labor, that's being left out of the equation as the global economy continues to shape itself.
And I thought even the ones that were flipped to Trump this election, I thought even places like Wayne County, that's always huge Democratic, it's still that Hillary got a less percentage of those votes.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it, neither one of these candidates for most people are the most desirable candidates even within the party rank and file. So, but we got what we got, and then we had to make choices, and I think a lot of what explains this surprise and the switch factor in the election results is that a lot of people, I think, who traditionally would have voted chose not to vote as one way of protesting, or they went third party. But because voter turnout was actually the lowest in 25 years. So a lot of people who would have otherwise voted didn't vote as their form of protest, or they may just not have voted for president. And then people who haven't voted in years, my father, for example, since 1970 came out and voted. And it's people like him who had a dramatic impact one way or another on this election result in these counties, particularly in Michigan, that switched and gave us that razor-thin surprise.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking less
Very,
than a
very
tenth of a
slim.
percent.
And I think that's a great point too, is like people felt two ways about this election. They were very against it, or they were very for it and very, wound up about for their person.
And for different reasons.
And for very different
They were
reasons, yeah.
voting in different trajectories and almost contradicting in some respects philosophically. But I think that demonstrates the frustration that people are facing, feeling right now, especially about the socioeconomics. So in any event.
All right, well, we're going to continue this conversation. We're just going to take a quick break, so stay tuned because there's more insights coming up.